country commitments. Professor Garnaut says that was their commitments on the table, levelled out, were fair enough for that 2 degrees. Others think that they still required more ambition. Before leaving Copenhagen, I think it also would be churlish not to recognise the very considerable efforts put in by both the PM and the Climate Change Minister, Penny Wong, in the lead up to and at the talks. In our wrap-up at the end, our judgment of Australia's position against the 5 tests gave them about 3.5 stars out of 5. A solid performance, but could have done better. But unfortunately, they've actually gone backwards, not forwards since then. But moreover, moving on from Copenhagen, it's important to understand it didn't send us backwards. It didn't take us forward as much as was hoped or hyped, but we didn't go backwards. The Bali roadmap was kept open. Kyoto was not killed. Discussions continue on Kyoto's next commitment period and on key areas of finance, technology and deforestation. Critically, the Accord's fragile steps forward include the maths that we've moved from Kyoto's 25% of global pollution to around 80% underneath the Accord. And finally, in the lead up to and following Copenhagen, we've seen an unprecedented surge in domestic policy action. In the 4 months between October 2009 and January 2010, over 150 new domestic policies and measures were announced globally. In the shadows of Copenhagen, this January was a very extraordinary time. It was a time when those of us who'd slaved and sweated over the CPRS and Copenhagen decided we'd remind ourselves to our friends and family. And this created a vacuum into which sashayed colourful mavericks such as Lord Monckton and his cohorts, swinging gaily on various gates: Climate Gate, Glacier Gate, Africa Gate, Amazon Gate. Now, these gates certainly have revealed some poorly worded communications and transparency of some climate scientists, and they have led to welcome reviews of the IPCC process. But none of these gates open to substantial flaws in climate science, or even of the key documents released in 2007. There's no denying that all these controversies and public perceptions around the Copenhagen conference put a dent in public confidence on the science and put those urging climate action on the defensive. And as if to rub salt in the wound, the weather also threw up icy conditions and extensive snowfalls, seemingly unfortunately targeted on the capital cities in Europe, Washington and Beijing. I say this, in fact, because actually, according to the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, January was the 4th warmest on record. Do you remember Canada's struggles to make enough artificial snow to actually keep the Winter Olympics going? Anyway, swimming against the tide of all these things was a remarkable report from Deutsche Bank in January entitled Investing in Climate Change 2010, a Strategic Asset Allocation Perspective. This reported that a portfolio with significant climate investments had outperformed a benchmark portfolio over the last 3 to 5 years. This report, not from someone's ex-communists, said, climate change is not merely an investment sector that may hold future promise, it is a sector that has already delivered and is continuing to deliver. That is why we believe institutional investors should be shifting their asset allocation towards climate change. For fiduciary reasons, if no other, they should be seeking out this attractive source of what they call alpha, which I understand is market return. The report, though, was also notable for this analysis of the Accord. It said the Accord leaves us with a choice. We can decide the glass is half full or half empty. The majority of the analysis seems to be the latter, because there was not only was there no legally binding agreement, but not even an agreed global emissions reductions target. We, however, believe the glass is half full, largely because the coalition of those who want to take action expanded to key emerging markets: China, India, Brazil and South Africa, and the Copenhagen Accord was drafted by senior leaders of these 4 countries, plus the President of the United States. An unprecedented outcome in international negotiations, and one that provides an important foundation towards a more ambitious agreement based on this understanding. In the sober light of early 2010, a glass half full approach is all we can take. There's no point in despair. But there are, in fact, reasons for optimism. And while we shouldn't be blinded by them, there are a number of other reasons for why the glass is half full. It's half full because the nations did sign up to the 2 degrees target. And it actually, and perhaps even more importantly, for the first time saw some of the world's major emerging economies agree to economy-wide emissions pledges in terms of intensity or the like, which is a prospect that would have been all but unthinkable in Australia a year or so ago. Now, the obvious caveat, of course, is that the commitments don't add up to 2 degrees, and analysis varies that they are 3 to 4 degrees or more. So we need to build ambition to actually make that target meaningful. And perhaps most importantly, they don't peak before 2020, which as I said before, is critical in the task of avoiding 2 degrees warming. But the glass is half full because there is significant and uncelebrated progress made on a number of other key fronts, including financing, forests and technology. And lastly, the glass is half full because of the surprisingly high levels of investment in clean technology, coming back to that Deutsche Bank report. Back in Bali, it was thought that a top-down agreement would actually be necessary to drive the global investment and trade in climate solutions, but the reality has been quite different. You just need to follow the money to see the emerging low-carbon political economy. A recent World Watch Institute report reported that in 2008, investment in new renewable energy power capacity exceeded coal, oil and gas technologies by some $30 billion worldwide. Developing countries have got a significant share of that, with China being the world's largest manufacturer now of solar photovoltaic technology and the second largest investor in the wind energy, closing in on the US in terms of investment. And Korea, which had invested 80% of its stimulus money, passed legislation that could lead to the introduction of emissions trading. Last week, the Pew Foundation released further reports backing this up, that even through the GFC in 2009, showed that clean energy investments since 2005 had increased 230%, and that in 2009, clean energy investments reached 162 billion, and were projected in 2010 with much more of the stimulus money starting to come through in other countries. They didn't do it as quick as we did here, coming through. These investments are being driven not only by concerns about climate change, of course, but also by other issues including energy security, transport and public health risks such as urban air quality. But they are also being driven by a strong eye on the commercial opportunities of this burgeoning multi-billion-dollar global market. Australian commentators caught up in the murky backwaters of recent political bloodletting have failed to recognise the extent to which Australia is being left behind in this burgeoning clean energy economy. A surprising insight into this new race for low-carbon competitiveness came at the recent Davos meeting from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who said, 6 months ago, my biggest worry was that an emissions deal would make American business, sorry, it's very transferable, American business less competitive compared to China. Now my concern is that every day we delay trying to find a price for carbon is a day that China dominates the green economy. Now, just as for national climate action commitments, these level of investments are substantial, but not yet